What's up, y'all? A-Trak here, back again in my playground, my laboratory, my little studio with my turntables here. I'm here to talk about some tricks and techniques and also to explain the thought process behind the new idea that I had the other day. This one's a little different because most of the time what I do is I'll grab, one song and do a routine or some sort of solo with it where I flip it in a way that is a performance in itself. So those flips tend to be like sort of attention grabbers or attention stoppers. So if I'm at a show and I go into one of those tricks, it's on some like, hey, everybody look at the DJ, he's doing something crazy. But sometimes I'm thinking about ways to integrate scratches and turntablism techniques within the mixes. But that could be tricky because scratching will generally stop the music that's playing on the record. And when you think about mixing, you're thinking about music, continuing its pace, still going so people can dance and whatnot. So the challenge is to come up with some of these tricks where the scratching becomes part of the mix or part of the music. Along that same train of thought, sometimes I'll be thinking about DJ mixes where rather than using identifiable songs, doing a mix where you can tell when one song is playing versus when another song is playing, and those songs being segments in themselves, sometimes I'll be thinking of mixes that are made out of these really modular kind of building blocks where all these elements sort of seeg one into the other. And by the way, there are certain DJs, especially in the house and techno world, who mix, for example, using Traktor with up to 4 decks and these layers of loops. If you've ever watched Luciano or Felix the House Cat or DJs like that, it's not really about when one song ends and when the next song starts. There might be a percussion loop that's gone for 30 minutes and a vocal comes in and out, and a kick drum is there for a while, and then there's another drum and other samples, and it's way more of a continuous flow. I've always found that interesting, and those kinds of thoughts make me want to approach certain mixes as, these sort of constructions of loop elements. And rather than just playing a song, sometimes I'm looking for, superimposed loops that can create a groove. So with that said, the other day I was listening to some records and I fell upon this interlude that was on the first Basement Jaxx album that goes like this. When I first heard that, I thought, this could be a cool loop element in some sort of layered composition. The interlude is just barely a few seconds longer than that. That's what I just played is basically it. I thought if I have that and a drum beat, maybe there's some sort of construction that I can build. Looking at this as a building block rather than a song in itself, because it doesn't have a beginning or an end. It's just a loop. So that was one idea that I had parked somewhere in the old brain container here. Then I thought of this other feature on Serato, which is the software that I use. By the way, I'm pretty sure you could do something similar on CDJs. This feature I'm talking about here is called Slip. And what it does is, if you scratch the record, rather than having the record actually stop, at the spot of your scratch and then pick up again, which is what a real record would do, this is kind of a cheat or a hack where you're able to scratch, and then when you let the record go, it picks up to where it would have been had you not scratched it. The idea is to be able to scratch something without losing the beat or getting out of a mix. And it's funny because to me that's the kind of feature that's kind of created for people who don't know how to scratch, to be honest, because part of the whole thing with scratching is how you let the record go and using a scratch to bring a sample in on the mix. So why would you want some sort of cheat that allows you to scratch and then catch up with the record? But what's kind of cool to me is to use a tool that I think was made for people who probably aren't very comfortable with scratching and flip it on its head and use it in a way that's clever and that that I can do with my technique. So just to really illustrate what this feature does, here is what happens when I scratch that jazzy little number without slip on. So you notice that when I scratched the record and I let it go, it picked up at the location that stopped as I scratched it. It's behaving like a real record. When you're scratching, you're pausing the playback basically and, you know, scrubbing it back and forth and then resuming the playback. What Slip does is that it allows you to scratch, and then as soon as you release the record, it catches up to where the playback would have been had you not stopped it. Like this. That's kind of crazy to me, because then I started thinking, I just imagined this piece that I, you know, created, and I'll perform in a sec, where I've got these mixes where I've got these loops playing, and it's that idea that I was saying before, where the loops are just like foundational elements, they're building blocks of some sort of groove that I've got going. Now I'm able to scratch as if it was like another layer, like it's another production element, and the mixing of these loops and the scratching on top create something similar to a song. So here's what I ended up coming up with.